Hello, welcome. If you are getting this video, it means that someone has probably asked you to judge debate at our upcoming tournament. So first, thank you so much. We're very excited and we appreciate the investment that you're putting into our youth. We believe that you will find something incredibly valuable for yourself as well. So this overview is going to be about the different types of debate that we have. We're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty with the rules, how those work in each round, how you take notes, which we call flowing in debate. And then to start off, we're going to go through a little bit of the training, the intensive training that we had for judges, and just touch on some high level things. And so if for some reason you were not able to make that, this will help you understand what we went over and also what we're looking for in the rounds. If you have never judged before, this will be really good for you just to make sure that you understand the forms that we're going to hand you and the questions to ask and how to decide a winning team in the round. And if you have judged before, our hope is that you'll find some value in this. And we also have some new rules from last year, and so we'll be going over those. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was just a quick summary that we had from Miha in our intensive debate training. And for those of you who were able to be there, he's a very, very experienced judge, and it goes a million miles an hour. But there were really three things that he talked about. The first one was anyone is qualified to judge. We do it all the time. We watch debates on TV. We watch the news. We watch. We have arguments with people, and so we're constantly thinking about which side wins, if you will. Now, we don't always put it in that context as we watch different arguments, and many times, and the thing that's unique about debate and why I'm a fanatic about the sport is that what debate teaches us is two things. One, how to evaluate each side, and the second one, how to have empathy or understanding for a side that we might not agree with. And I think that really brings us to the highest purpose of debate. And the reason that we are training our kids to debate is not so that they can just argue with another person, but that they learn to argue and to discuss well. As everyone are very aware with all the news that we have, is there's so much contention and people are afraid to express different ideas because they're afraid, of getting in trouble or somebody bashing them. And so when you think about the heart of debate goes back to how our country was founded, that we need different ideas. It's essential. We're not always going to agree. And you'll see when you go in with these kids, many times these kids have to argue on a side they don't agree with. And it's teaching to think, well, why would somebody believe this? And if you understand why would somebody believe this, you begin to understand them as a human. And so you can tell that I love this process, and there really is a deeper meaning both to what these kids are doing, and I hopefully that as you come in that you will get some of that too. The second thing that Miha talked about was how to be an unbiased judge. Now, this is tricky because we don't do that when we watch the news. We don't do that when we have a presidential debate. We have opinions, we have things that we think are important, and we tend to weigh the sides based on our beliefs or our experience. So within the sport of debate, it's very important to come in as an unbiased judge. And what that means is this: every debate, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of them, every debate is based on first common man knowledge. So there's a group of knowledge in the world that you should know as an adult, like, basics about the economy, basics about the government, those types of things. So within that realm, these kids will have what we call a resolution, which is you debate this thing is what a resolution means. And so they'll have that resolution, and then they'll build up arguments to support that side of the resolution. As a judge, it is our place to say, okay, I understand the resolution. We don't choose to agree with it or disagree with it. And then we listen to the arguments and then decide who best supported their position based on their argumentation. And then the way that we do that is the third thing that Miha talked about, which is identifying clashes. Now, there's a couple things I just wanted to summarize in this part, and we will also send you out a summary of Miha's coaching, so you'll have it in the room with you of how to choose between clashes. So a clash basically means first team came up and said, "Hey, this is wrong. We're going to do this thing, and here's why." The other team gets up and says, hey, their why doesn't make sense. We believe this. So that becomes a clash in the round where they have two conflicting ideas. So on your sheet of paper, which you'll have that will have clashes, you'll have like clash 1, clash 2, clash 3, is that you'll write down, okay, this first clash was about should we, use the military or diplomacy? And they'll have a specific thing about that. And then you'll write for each team, you'll say it was supported this way and it was supported this way. And that way, when you go back and you make your decision, you look at those two sides, choosing the side based on who best explained it. How did they explain it? Were their examples relevant? And did the impact matter? And I think in a clash, that's a really important thing to remember is someone can tell you a whole bunch of information, but if they don't tell you why it matters, you have to make it up. And so if the debaters don't tell you why it matters, they're going to leave it up to you to wake it up. And then that makes it so that they don't have as much impact on you as the judge when weighing clashes. So impact and why it matters are very important. Just an example of that. If you had an impact that said, hey, everybody is going to lose $1 in the United States, and the impact of the other side's argument, hey, everybody in the United States is going to die, obviously the impact of everybody going to die would weigh more. And so that would have a bigger weight on your decision between those two arguments, assuming the rest is built up. So just those three things, anybody is qualified to judge. Come set all your beliefs aside and listen to the two sides and see how well that they're able to represent. And then the third one, deciding your winner using the clashes. So what was the clash within the arguments? What did they argue about? I will make one side about this. You are also probably going to have some very, very young debaters, and you may not have any clashes. We call that ships passing in the night in debate, where they just argued completely different cases and never clashed with each other. At that point, there's other things you can do to decide the round. Maybe who had the most arguments, who had the best supported arguments. But really at that point, that's going to be your decision, how they were best both supported. This becomes important too, because this is a very special tournament. It will be a decision in room. So the way the process will work is the kids will come in, they'll do their debate, they'll come and shake your hand, and then they will leave the room for 15 minutes. During that time, you have time to deliberate, to go over your notes, to decide who it is. At the end of that 15 minutes, they're going to come back in. When they come back in, you're going to give them your decision. And I do recommend doing it in this order. Give them your decision because they'll be anxious to hear that. This side won, this side lost. Then at that point, what you're going to do is you're going to explain why. And then you're going to say, based on this clash, I chose this team. Or based on I didn't have any clashes, I chose this team. Here's how I decided. Here's what I heard. When you do that, use comparative language. And what I mean by that is don't just say this side won because they had a better argument. Tell them why. This side won. They had a better argument because their impact said that it would kill all people and they build it out. This side's argument just said everybody was going to lose $1, right? And so explain to them the comparative language, because the purpose of this decision in Rome is it's helping these kids both improve during the tournament and get ready for the year. This is one of their first tournaments of the year. And so this really helps them build out their cases, helps them understand what judges hear. And because they may think they said something completely different, but you heard something completely different. Also, don't be afraid to tell them if you did not understand their case at all, because they need to know that. And you're going to have some very smart kids that may overcomplicate some things. So next, we're going to dig into some of the nitty gritty. We're going to go through some of the rules. Rules you will receive are a picture of the ballots, so you can see those, as well as the clash form that we just talked about, so you can see what you'll be given when you come in here. And then I'll also show you a copy of the flow sheets, and what that means is the best way to take notes through the round. So let me share my screen. We are going to start at the bottom of team policy. So you can see I have a copy of the team policy debate rules here. We're going to send you this to read, so I won't go through, but I'm going to explain some key parts that will help you in judging. Team policy is a debate over a policy or a law. So when you judge team policy, you're acting as Congress yourself. Should we pass this law or should we not pass this law? Team policy is what we call heavy evidence, in that the kids' evidence weighs a lot within the debate round. And so where the argumentation and the explanation are also very important, evidence is important. And I'll explain how to weigh those clashes in team policy as we go through. So the first part of this is this where you say it is the job of the affirmative team. So your team will come in with a case to uphold the resolution, what they're defending, right? Or we affirm the resolution, and they'll tell you the resolution, and then they'll tell you this is what we're going to do about it. They call that their mandate, and then they'll give you their arguments, and those will be here's why we're going to do this. And those they'll use names, like they'll say background, justification, advantage, harm. All of those are things to support what they're going to do. So if you think about it from that angle, that will help you understand as you're going through to understand the story of what they're explaining. So now if the affirmative team fails to uphold the resolution, the negative team wins, and the judge should vote accordingly. So there's a couple of things in here I just want to mention that you will hear come up in the rounds. So we talk a lot about the 4 pillars. Those pillars are solvency. All solvency means is, does their plan solve for the harms or the advantages or the justifications that they've given you? So for example, if there is a plan that says, hey, we are going to eliminate food stamps, and then they come down, and then one of their harms might be this is going to help people keep their money, right? So what they would need to show is that true? If food stamps were eliminated, would taxpayers get more money? And so they have to explain that link to you. If they don't explain that link to you, that leaves an opening for the negative team to come in and say, that's just not true. Even if you eliminate food stamps, the government's going to reallocate that somewhere else, and taxpayers are not going to get the money. So that's where it's important to understand, does that solvency they have really solve for the advantages or harms that they are? Very simply, does their plan solve for the things they say it's going to? The second pillar is called inherency. What this means is that, has this already been solved, or is it in the process of being solved? For example, if someone is trying to pass a law and that law was already passed last month, the plan would be inherent because there's no law to pass. Congress wouldn't pass another law if there's a law standing in place. So that's all that taken care of. There's no reason for you to pass this plan. The third one is called significance. Now, so what significance means is this something that Congress should pay attention to? Is this significant enough to be a law in Congress, or is this better handled by the states? Too small? Would this even be taken before Congress? And that can be determined by the size or the impact on society. Is this an appropriate way to allocate the United States resources? And so that's what significance means. Is it important enough? Camera. Topicality are my least favorite. So what topicality means is that someone comes up and says, hey, they're arguing for something that's not within the resolution. In team policy, they're given a resolution for the year, and they argue that all year. But if somebody, like ours is about South and Central America. So for example, if somebody came up and their whole case was about policies towards China, that would not be topical. Now, the reason that I say this is my least favorite is this is where it kinds to get technical, and we get teams going back and forth on arguments that are just not very fun to listen to. So, but that's what that means. So if you hear somebody say topical, that's what they're saying. Your plan is not part of the resolution we've been given for the year. So those are your 4 pillars. If the affirmative team does not hold up all 4 pillars, they lose. So it is the job of the negative team to show that one of those 4 pillars met within the round. And so that's a real simple way to understand within team policy. The second thing within team policy is when you're weighing arguments. As I said at the beginning, we do have evidence that is very important in team policy. So, for example, if I have an argument from the affirmative, and they give me a great argument, they explain the argument, and they give me a piece of evidence. And so debaters are trained to give you what is my argument, explain my argument, and then give me an example or proof, and then finally tell me why it matters. So in every argument you should hear. So in team policy, what we do is we say, okay, here's my statement, here's my example, here's my explanation of what this means. Now here's my example. That will be a piece of evidence that they will read in the room. And when they read that evidence, they'll read you the author, they'll read you the quote. And that means that evidence has been read into the round. And so that stands within the round. And then they'll tell you why it matters. So then on the negative side, if they have a new argument, and I'm not going to go into the rebuttals for just a minute, but let's say on the negative side, they come up and they have an argument and they give you a point, they explain it, but they don't have evidence for it. They don't quote evidence. That's not going to weigh as strong as the affirmative's argument. Now, I will say one thing about this. On the negative, many times the negative won't know what the case is when they're coming in. So the job of the negative, even without evidence, is still to have enough common man knowledge to be able to build arguments or show and prove that one of those four pillars is not met. So when you hear a negative rebuttal, using, and if they didn't have evidence, now you're weighing on how well was their explanation, and based on common man knowledge, did that make sense? And if you feel that evidence is still the most heavy, right? So you want to say that. So if it's close, you're going to go with evidence. But if it's clearly an explanation by the debater that you feel overcomes and pokes a hole and says this really isn't solvent, then you would vote for the negative. So as you can see, it's a different skill on both team policy. In every debate, we'll have 3 affirmatives, 3 negatives. So they get practice on both sides. Okay, so within here, you're going to see there's times. You'll have this. The debaters are always responsible for their own times. You are not. There's a couple things in here that I think are important to remember as you go through. They will hold each other accountable. Debaters are not allowed to pass notes to each other while they're speaking. Table during prep times, they can talk to each other. Once the speaker's speaking, they can't pass notes. They're able to do that. That there are what we call no new arguments in the rebuttal. And I'm going to jump over here to our flow sheet that you can see. So this is what you'll be given when you come in. This is where you write all the notes from the first affirmative, constructive. This will be your negative speaker. This will be your second team policy speaker, and this will be your fourth negative speaker. So in each, these are constructives. What that means is that the debaters can bring up new arguments. Once you go into the rebuttals, debaters cannot bring up new arguments. Now, they can bring up new rebuttals to an existing argument, and they can also bring in new evidence to an existing argument. So that's really important. No new arguments here, but you can have new analysis and new evidence. Okay, let's go back over to our rules. So they follow this religious thing. This will come up. It would come up between debaters, rarely between the judge. So one thing you are in charge in the room. And that's what this means, is in this first line of defense. So if you perceive that there is something going wrong in the room, you can stop the debate and say, hey, you can stop the debate. Timers will stop, and you are in charge if you feel that there's something that is not appropriate happening within the round. And when I say not appropriate, big things, interrupting the other speaker or passing notes to each other, this again rarely happens. But I just wanted you to be aware that you are considered in charge in the room. And if there is any kind of conflict, you can stop the debate and have a conversation. So now I will say this. We have had before too, during the debate, unless it's something major, which would be, you would probably then end up with a disciplinary ballot. And what I mean by disciplinary ballot is you do a double loss. And that means that the teams have misbehaved so badly that neither of them get a win. And we call that disciplinary. And then you would come to the tournament director and discuss with her about what happened. I've never seen that happen. The final decision lies with you if you have something that happens. When decision in Rome, you are not there to argue with the debaters. You're going to give them your decision, and then you're going to explain to them why you chose like you did. I will say these kids are fantastically polite, and they will probably ask you a few questions. Did you hear this? Could I have explained this better? And you'll have 15 minutes to give them feedback, which they're so grateful for as they go into the next round. But at the same time, your decision is final. And so the process and the way that works is that as soon as you make your decision before the kids come back in, you're going to text your copy of your ballot to Tab. And that's where we put everything together for the kids, and then give them your decision. And so that way, then you start thinking in your head, oh, did I make a mistake? First of all, you did not make a mistake. Just remember, you judged the debate as you heard the debate. The debate had ended. Any further information the debaters give you, they should have had in the debate. So again, that burden rests back on. Okay, so audience members may not give verbal, written during the round. So you may have people in there watching. If the people in watching get disruptive, you can send them out of the room. So that's really what that means. Okay, so now I'm going to go back up here. Team policy is the longest to explain, but it also, we kind of lay the groundwork for the others. Now, Lincoln Douglas is a very fun debate. It was based on the original debates that they had value, like a value of integrity or a value of truth. In this particular resolution, you may hear values of national security. So Lincoln Douglas first resides on a value. And then from there, it goes into what we call criterion. That criterion tells you, how do I measure that value? So if I have a value of truth, well, how can I prove that value of truth? And that's the criterion. And they're going to drop into their arguments. Now, the reason that this is different from team policy is this is not an evidence-based debate. The essential part of Lincoln Douglas is how well did they explain and give examples of their arguments. And so when you listen to the Lincoln Douglas, you're not going to hear as much evidence. Sometimes you will, because we'll have crossovers and they tend to rely on evidence. In Lincoln Douglas, evidence is the least. And here's why. It's considered a more advanced debate. At this point, we expect the debaters to be able to explain and use illustrations in their debate that I can understand as a judge without quoting me evidence. Now, we want them also to use real world examples. And the way that they'll talk about those is they say, well, here's an application. So understanding that first there's a value, and the teams may have different values. That may be your first clash. One team says truth, another one says, national security. So they're going to argue which value should be preferred. So that's going to be, usually that's a clash. There's not very many Lincoln Douglas that you see at the beginning of the year that don't clash on the value. And so if you don't have a clash there, great. That makes the debate even more fun. The second one is the criterion. How do we measure this value? You may have a clash there where one team good way to measure the value and the other team says, I don't think that's a good way to measure the value. So that would be a clash. And again, you're looking for why. Did you explain to me why? And do I understand? And can I weigh those two explanations apart from each other? Then you're going to drop down into your arguments. And so depending on the argument, as you get to this point, there may be a clash or not between the arguments. In Lincoln Douglas, the most important thing is if they win the value, they pretty much have won the debate. And you'll see, because that means if they win the value, their arguments carry through. And you're still going to weigh these as you get to the end. But they will argue over the value and they'll argue over the criterion. And then within the arguments, they might choose to say, I don't even think that argument's relevant to this value. So I'm going to argue against this other one. In team policy, and just to go back for a minute, we really take arguments a lot. We're looking more for dropped arguments in team policy because the debaters need to really respond, even if they just say, hey, this one isn't relevant. They need to respond to it. Lincoln Douglas is a little bit different. They're in very short time frames. And so they will prioritize their responses to arguments. And they'll say, this is the most important argument. We're going to clash on that one. So, but if the other team gets back up and is able to prove that the argument that they didn't respond is important in the debate, then they can bring that back up. But it's not so much of an argument of dropped arguments, but which ones pertain the most to the debate. And this will make more sense when you go through a round because the speeches are very quick and the debaters are condensed. So just in summary for Lincoln Douglas, this is a value-based debate. The argument of the value is most important. The argument of the criterion follows, and then the argument between based on their supporting arguments inside the debate. And their impacts are weighed most importantly. Applications are a supplement. And so when you're comparing clashes, team policy, you're going to weigh that evidence or that application very heavily. In Lincoln Douglas, you're going to weigh the explanation and the impacts heavily. Who best explained it? Is that an appropriate application? Just one more thing on applications. When you listen to applications too, because this is a more advanced form of debate, you want to make sure that the application fits what they're saying. So if they come up and say, hey, here's this application, but it doesn't pertain to the argument at all, that's where you say we might have lost some strength within that argument. So just making sure you're aware you're still listening to the applications and saying, does this have an impact on the value, the criterion, and that particular argument? This one too, you'll see you have all the times in here, etc. Same rule, constructive new arguments, rebuttals, no new arguments. They still can bring up new examples, new evidence, new analysis of existing arguments, but no new arguments. They will be taking care of their time limits. And there'll be cross-examination, both in team policy and in Lincoln Douglas cross-examination. These have their prep teams, which they will keep. Lincoln Douglas, even though it's not as heavy debate, they still need, if they quote something, they need to have that documented correctly. And the teams will hold each other accountable for this because they'll ask each other for evidence. And so these are just all the rules about how they do the evidence within there. Okay, same thing that we just talked about before. You are the final judge, audience. We don't want them making noise in the round and distracting the debaters. Okay, let's go to parliamentary. Okay, parliamentary debate rules. Now, parliamentary is one of my absolute favorites. I love this debate, but it is a impromptu debate. And the way this works is you have two teams with two people on each side. 20 minutes before the round, they get a resolution. So they have 20 minutes to prepare for that debate. And I will tell you, you will be shocked at how well these guys come up with debates in that amount of time. I'm always amazed as I judge these rounds. They're so much fun. And so they can get any kind of resolution. It can be, or dogs better than cats, or it can talk about current US policy. And so there's always a pretty wide range within parliamentary. Sometimes you'll have resolutions that are a little more fun. Sometimes you'll have resolutions that are a little more serious. When they come into the parliamentary round, they're going to frame the debate for you. So they're going to have a resolution. And what we mean by that is they're going to come in and they're going to say, hey, we think this is a value debate. We talked about Lincoln Douglas. We think it's a policy debate, like team policy, or we just think this is a fact. It's a fact. Dogs are better than cats. I don't really believe that, but dogs are better than cats. And so that within that framework, now they build their arguments out, or what they'll call in parliamentary, they use a little bit differently, which they'll call them criterion. I will say arguments because it's not coming. So you will hear them, they'll outline their arguments. So this is going to be very similar to Lincoln Douglas in that evidence is not required, right? So there's going to be heavy, this is again our most advanced debate. This is going to be a heavy weight on how well are they good arguments. One, is it a good argument? Two, based on common man knowledge. Two, is it explained well? Is there supporting examples? Doesn't have to be evidence. It can be, examples that they know, just like Lincoln Douglas. And then the third one, how strong are their impacts? And so that's how you're going to weigh the debate as you go through the debate. This one is also a little bit shorter, and I'll show you the flow sheet for this one. Right here, you can see that we only have 6 speeches throughout the round, and then the times are much shorter. So they have a little bit less time to be able to build out their argumentation. Just one final note overall in the 3 debates is within the team policy, when you're deliberating, you are allowed to ask for evidence. You can ask to see the case. You can ask to see anything, right, within that round. Lincoln Douglas, that is not common practice, I will say, to ask for evidence within Lincoln Douglas. But if you feel that there is a contested piece of evidence within the round, it's rare just because it's a value. But if you feel there's a contested piece of evidence within the round that is not common man knowledge, as we discussed, you can ask for that piece of evidence as well. In parliamentary, we don't ask for evidence or cases or anything. And so in parliamentary, this is the rule of thumb. When the debaters are debating, first it's a common man debate. And that means that it should make sense to you. And it should be common knowledge. And this is the one too. So if you're an engineer and you're coming in with an engineering background, you're going to know more than they do about a certain topic. That do not weigh that into the round. This is common man, what people should understand. The other thing in parliamentary is that we say that the word of the debater has priority. Now, if somebody says something like the sky is, black, or well, maybe it would be black and white, but all cats are pink. Like that would not be the word of debater because it violates common man knowledge. If that debater has studied something like physics and gone really deep on it and has a deep explanation of that they understand, their word carries through the round. And so then it would be up to the other team to be able to come back and disprove that fact. And so just important on that is I've seen many times in parliamentary where somebody that's very experienced will say like, I don't agree with that, or I'm not sure. You always have to take it back to a common man knowledge across the debate. Is this common man knowledge? And are they debating with that foundation? Okay, so real quick before we end this, I just wanted to show you the Lincoln Douglas flow sheet. You can see, as we discussed before, this is a very short round. The debaters have to hustle through that. and you will receive whatever debate you're judging, you'll receive one of these when you get there. This is, and we did go over this last night too, you will also see this form for each of the debates. And you will rank, you'll write one speaker here, your next speaker here. So this is a Parley one. So if he tells me he's the prime minister, I'm going to circle that. If this one's the member, I'm going to circle that. And then I'm going to write the students' names. Now we're going to hopefully have, so you don't have to do that, but you would be, but in case you have one that you don't, that's where the students' names go. And then you've got your other speakers here. So these are going to be your affirmative team or your, and these are going to be your negative or opposition team. These are different things that you will analyze as you go through the round on the back of another piece of paper that helps me think through this. How persuasive were they? Did they really make me believe what they said? How well was their support? Remember, depending on the type of the debate, that's going to be explanation, evidence, examples, and their impact. How well did they analyze? This is specifically focused on the explanation. Did they take this and fully explain it to me so I could link what they're trying to solve with what they're telling? This is refutation. When the other team brought up an argument, how well did they come back and dismantle that argument, if you will? Their delivery is their speaking style. And their organization is, this is one that, as you look at the, were they organized when they got up to speak? How well did they have their notes in order? Were they scrambling? Was it just little things that can help them get better organized? And so the way to rate these is that we say that a normal high school student is a 3. So that's somebody that, you would expect if you went and listened to a new high school student. And this was really kind of, as a general rule, we think of those as you really need to work in this area. And so that would be, you'd say, I wouldn't expect that from a normal high school student. And so you might need to work here. When we go up into these levels, you start going, wow, that was really good, but I think you might have a couple things to improve still, so I'm going to give you a 4. If they blow your socks off, that's where the 5 goes. These are your absolute superstars, and that's the same in every debate and how you analyze those. Then you'll see in Lincoln Douglas, you have value. This actually walks you through what we just did. You have value argumentation. Did they have a value? Did they support their value? Support, remember support being analysis and examples, less than up here in support on team policy, we're looking for evidence. Down here, again, refutation, how well did they deliver and were they organized? This organization comes into a little bit in professionalism, smiling and getting to their desk, and you'll see as you come in, some kids will be better than others. And then down here in team policy, well, actually, was talking about parliamentary up above. In team policy, you're going to have another one in here that's called cross-examination and evidence, which this pertains exactly to their evidence. I apologize. I was in parliamentary was referring to support, which would have been closer to Lincoln Douglas. So this one does give you an exact one. How was your evidence? Cross-examination, are they asking the questions to be able to move their case forward? And then the same 3, delivery and organization. Okay, that is it. Your judge orientation training. Again, thank you so much for participating in this and coming. If you have any questions at all, you can respond directly to the email that they send out. And we also will have plenty of us to help you at the debate. And we really look forward to seeing